Game directions. When I was younger, my friends and I would play this game called Directions. The object of the game was to find your way through a complicated building or maze the quickest. You would take turns going through, and the person who got through quickest was the winner. You would always be on lookout for new places to play at, junkyards, neighborhoods, etc. And whoever found the new place would have to go through first. It brought up the idea of playing directions at an abandoned factory at the end of town. Since it was my idea, I had to go through first. It was an incredibly creepy place. We played at the night. I was terrified, but luckily I had brought a flashlight. The front door was barely on its hinges and creaked loudly when opened. Most of the windows were broken, and it was obvious from the graffiti and the litter that the only people who went in were teenagers and various drug addicts. I made sure to keep my eyes peeled for crazy people as I wandered through. Everything was cold, colder than the outside. Nearly every wall had some sort of graffiti on it. Although the ground was filthy, I walked softly so I could hear anything that I thought was important to hear, like other footsteps or voices. After all, I didn't want to get stabbed by a trumped-up lunatic. Around halfway through, the graffiti starts to die off. What was at first an angular mention of gang names and various symbols turned into a smattering of faded marks. Not many people came this far. I was sweating from fear. I felt that there was someone watching me, but I tried to convince myself that I'm just being paranoid. At one point, my footsteps sounded louder than usual. I stopped moving and heard footsteps on the floor below me. They were paced in time with mine. I just stood there, trying to hold my breath so I could be heard, so I could hear mine. I just stood there, trying to hold my breath so I couldn't be heard, so I could hear better. The footsteps soon stopped after mine, and I was horrified. If I moved, whoever that was would know that I'm there. I stood there in silence that lasted for what felt like 10 minutes. Probably only lasted a couple of seconds. The silence was broken when the other footsteps were running back, and I thought they were leaving. I felt relieved. I heard them run upstairs. They were coming for me, and I panicked and I ran. I ran through the dark halls, trying to keep my flashlight stable. The footsteps were following me, and I could hear them coming towards me. I couldn't tell from where, just that they were getting louder, and I quickly turned around the hall. As I kept running, I looked over my shoulder and shined my flashlight back. I saw a man coming after me. He had really small eyes. His mouth was inhumanely large. His tongue was hanging out of his chest, and his chest was covered in scars. I screamed, and even more adrenaline shot through my body. I used every ounce of energy to run as fast as I could, and I saw my exit door, and I threw myself into it. The door shot open, and I landed on the gravel outside, and I quickly got to my feet, and I ran straight the hell out of there and to my friends, who asked me why I was crying and out of breath. I explained what happened. They insisted it was a crazy drug addict. No one else would go through there because of that. This is most similar to what I saw, except the mouth was too big. I went back to the abandoned factory a few days ago with some friends because I told them the story and they were intrigued. When I found out down the floor I started hearing the footsteps that was on the bottom floor. There was no floor below me. My friends and I tried to reenact what I heard. I had stood in place where I stood that night, and they would walk around somewhere else until it sounded the same as it did then. And I realized that whoever this person was was not below me, but about 15 feet behind me. He did run back up and then up some stairs. He walked quietly closer to me, and then he ran at me. This realization makes thinking back at that night infinitely scarier. He was following me the whole time, matching his footsteps up with mine so I couldn't hear him.